everyone, and welcome back to Challengers Chat Room, your one-stop shop for all things SGC. My name is Sam Smax Hyde. I'm joined by Matt Cubby Samuelson, and we also have our guest right away this time. We got Wolverine with us on the call. How are you two doing?
Doing great.
I
Wolverine,
am
thanks for coming
doing
on, man. Good to have you.
fantastic. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
Yeah,
Of
for
course.
sure.
Yeah, I'm really excited that you're here, like right away, so we can just hop right into what we're going to talk about here. Before we get into any of that, is there anything you guys want to just like have as a statement before we get into anything?
Looking forward to the tier list memes that we're going to have later in the show. It should be a good time. There have been some bangers on Twitter. Hopefully we get a few more in here. So yeah.
For sure. For sure.
I'm very excited for those as well. So yeah, let's take a look at what we're going to be talking about today. Of course, there are those tier list memes, as you can see there. We also had our very own open qualifier here at Challengers Uprising. The second one, all of our teams are now there, and with that, all of Scouting Ground Circuit leagues are set in stone here with their teams. We're going to be going over the results of the last week as well, and then we have a little bit of a spicy topic here at the end, which we'll be getting into a little bit later on into the show. But yeah, let's just talk about the open qualifier that we had here. I believe it was 2 days ago.
Yeah, I love how you say like spicy topic when like you opened up Pandora's box, but yeah, we'll save that one for later. So
We'll get there. We'll get there.
yeah, we'll get there. Anyway, diving into the first thing, Cup OQ2. We had a few games that were on stream. We had our last 4 teams make it into Cup, so all the leagues are set. And congrats to those teams. I believe it was CLT Phoenix that made it in, as well as Frostfire, LBGN, and TFT making it for OQ2. And Wolverine, I know that you caught some of those games. Any thoughts right off the bat on what we saw as some of the teams that made it on in?
I think Life Support and XT Esports are obviously the two most hyped teams coming out of that. So those will obviously be pretty interesting to see those teams
Yeah,
progress.
yeah. Life Support made it in OQ1. Actually, XT Esports they lost to Frostfire, in that match. Yeah, I know that XT Esports though, like they've actually gotten off to a good start. Have you seen a lot of their games?
I've seen a few. I honestly think XT Esports looks really good against middle pack teams, but I'm curious to see them actually go against higher tier teams because I think their playstyle is probably going to do pretty poorly.
Okay.
Well, we did see a little bit of a against Frostfire. Of course, that wasn't on the mainstream, but XT himself did stream that for us. So we got a few of the highlights there. 40-minute slugfest in which the Kazakhs got very far ahead early. It looked very over, but honestly, I was pretty impressed that XT were able to stick into that game to the 40-minute mark, even though they did end up losing anyway.
You said that like their playstyle might struggle against like better teams. Do you like want to kind of expand on that one, Wolverine?
I think when they've looked most successful, it's obviously with like Yunbi on a carry champ. You see him on like the Diana,
Yeah.
when like he's really popped off. I think in general they operate on playing really fast and just overpowering their opponents. But I don't think their players are individually good enough to actually be able to do that against higher tier teams.
Okay.
I don't think you can just blind pick the Diana and run through people.
Yeah, interesting. I kind of agree. Young is really good, but yeah, better teams will probably punish that. Okay, interesting. I just want to get your thoughts on that one.
Yeah.
I know that XD Esports they got a really tough draw in that group. Personally, I actually thought that them and Frostfire they were the best teams that were in OQ2. I don't know if you have like any different opinions on that one, Wolverine, but that was a rough draw they got. They had to go through Prophecy, which they're not a slouch team, and then also Frostfire with Quas, a lot of experience from them. Do you have like any thoughts on like Frostfire as a whole? I don't know how many games you caught of them.
I haven't seen a lot. They lost to life support, correct?
Yeah, they got 2-1s yesterday by Life Sport.
Yeah, honestly, not a lot of thoughts on Frostfire. I think
Okay.
they're okay.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think that match was definitely the pinnacle of OQ2. It's a bummer that we didn't get to like analyze it ourselves, but it was definitely a banger. I would have liked to see both of those two teams in Cup, but it is pretty nice for Frostfire that they do make it in. It is a lot of props to them because we've been really hyping up XT. Of course, they're a very new team, and to have this like big explosion right away within the first 2 weeks is pretty exciting stuff. So, yeah, I think there are some question marks there, like you mentioned. They don't really have what it takes to take down the top tier teams quite yet, but we haven't really seen them too long. So maybe they'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, with that, we do have the other three teams, of course. We got Charlotte Phoenix, who did make it in. This is a team that I'm personally really excited about, especially because they did play that Soraka top, which I was shocked by. But they pulled it off. They made it work, and they're in Cup now.
Yeah, for a team that doesn't play Set or Ornn to put the Fiora one trick on Soraka top and make it in, I don't think any of us were expecting that, but they made it work. And that team, like, I don't know what your opinion is on them, Wolverine, but it feels like they play super fast. And if they aren't able to pull off that play style, then they just kind of fall over and die. And they also feel like they can't pull it off against some of the top tier teams. But they are exciting to watch because they go pedal to the metal. It's the only way they play.
Yeah, I think CLT is akin to XT, but not really the same.
Yeah.
They operate on making the game bad in which they can, thrive. Like they need the chaos, which I only think works against inexperienced teams.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've seen that. I've casted a few of their games, and um, I will say that I think Disconnector is super smurf in the bot lane. Like I've seen him carry on Aphelios, I've seen him carry on Ezreal, I've seen him carry on Rumble, Senna bot lane. And even in the games that they play poorly, it still feels like this guy is able to possibly 1v9, and they built a comp around him in that OQ2 game, and he actually was able to pull it off. Few mishaps, but they ended up getting through. Um, it was actually a really close 40-minute game. Kind of an
Yeah.
exciting OQ. Yeah.
Kind of the theme of that day was just the really really close 40-minute games. But yeah, we got those two victors there. Just looking at the rest of Scouting Ground Circuit as a whole, we do have a few other teams who have some promotions and players individually. We got Pumi, Winston, and Asta all making it up to Academy here. So congratulations to those three guys. Of course, Pume and Winston were not currently on a team here, but Asta was. He was on Mirage, and they have to slot in their new AD now, and it is Asilian.
Yeah. And Asilian has actually looked really good. I don't know if you guys know this. I know that I didn't know this until this week. Wolverine didn't know this until we hopped on this call. That guy's 15, and he looks really good in the bot lane. I mean, them and Mist, they beat Evan RL and Papa Chow 2 games straight, like a very experienced collegiate bot lane. He's already off to a really good start. I would not be surprised if he got the starting job for that roster.
Yeah,
I've,
I don't
I've
think he
been very
looked bad.
impressed.
Yeah.
And it's just his first few weeks here with this team as well. Very very impressive stuff bringing that guy in. The prodigy in the bot lane, as we saw from Robbie Bob's tweet earlier today. But yeah, I wanna touch on another tweet in specific here related to Academy. Now, you guys may have seen this. It was from tweet or treats on Twitter. He mentions how he's got a lot of frustrations with how Academy is currently being run and how it does kind of feel like a retirement home. And he even goes as far as to say that it's unacceptable at this point.
Yeah. I know that we were talking earlier about Wolverine about like how we think Academy should be run. Treats feels like it's a retirement home for LCS players. What do you think these Academy teams should be doing to try and foster some sort of talent that like is coming up?
I honestly think Academy is being run really poorly right now. I honestly would take it in a different direction. I think most people would. I think Academy should 100% just be importing as much as they can. I think the Academy system uh, reduces like any of the concerns around imports. You look at the hesitance that LCS teams have had around importing Koreans, and it's because there's concerns about them speaking English, there's concerns about them not being able to play in NA. You can put them in the academy system, they'll be the best players in academy, they'll elevate the other players, and you'll be farming residency. You'll be teaching them English, helping them acclimate, to NA. It would make the academy level higher, and you would be developing really good players.
Yeah, I wanna touch a little bit more on the bolstering the rest of the league with it, because I think that's really I think as someone who does play on NA and like is a fan of NALCS, I think that's really the biggest thing that people will be really questioning when it comes to this, because the first impression when you think of like imports and academy is like, man, that could have been an NA solo queue all star instead. But I really like that it's kind of like bolstering the rest of the players and everything. So how like specifically do you think that's really gonna like help the NA native people as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's like a really common response where you look
Yeah,
at an import taking an academy spot, and you're thinking it's less natives, right? But I think you would rather have 30 good natives. You take your 30 best natives in academy, you take 20 or 10 or however many imports, and then you're taking your best academy players and putting them up against players that are better than them. And you're actually developing that talent way more than you would if they were versing the 20 lower academy players. So we might actually see natives be able to practice to a point where they could play in LCS, because the problem with academy right now is no one's promoting, right? There's just 50 players who sit there every year. Well, when do we actually see academy players go up to LCS other than a few individuals?
like Demonte, who's already been LCS.
It's interesting. Like when you talk about like kind of importing Koreans or just importing people in general, like what types of players do you want to import into the system? Like, is it young? Is it players that are on scouting teams or like B squads for these LPL and LCK teams, or do you want to bring over like some A tier talent from those leagues and see how they fit into like academy and the rest of NA?
I think we've had a lot of problems in the actual players we import, because there's not enough scouting done into solo queue of other regions. Really, we're looking for already developed players, already people who've been pro for years and years and years. But generally, pros who are in their prime don't really want to leave the region, so we're ending up picking up players who are past their prime, can't really play in LCK, LEC, whatever. So we're not really getting the good imports for academy. You'd probably end up looking at like the academy squads, or even just taking them straight out of Korean solo queue.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
definitely agree with the types of imports being very lackluster, because in the franchising years we got Crown, Bang. Core JJ is kind of an anomaly, but he's one of those as well, where you have a lot of question marks about like, well, yeah, these guys have won worlds, but it definitely feels like they haven't really reached that in a bit. Like for Crown, it was only 1 year removed, but still he wasn't looking as good on the Samsung team immediately afterward. He was even getting replaced. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Do you think that those issues with NA having problems importing people are going to like transfer over to that as well? Like, are we going to be getting Bang in Academy and stuff like that?
I think it is probably likely, unfortunately, because of the lack of any real staff in pro play. The reason you're seeing imports that we have been importing is because there's a lack of like actually any individuals who are capable of doing real scouting. So you just pick up players who are more or less known quantities.
Oh,
Interesting. Yeah. I Scouting is tough, and I know that like Peter Dunn does like a ton of scouting over in EU and has like a very systematic approach to it. And it's been interesting because like I know that Shadow, like their jungler, actually plays mid and solo queue. And it's like really interesting, like watching him because Shadow is one of the players that over in the LEC this year, like he exploded. I mean, he was an insane jungler over there, playing champs like Lee Sin and Rek'Sai to perfection, and then he was also playing control tanks and having like really good performances against Yankos and other junglers. And it's interesting because like we see the talent being cultivated over there with no imports, and we see the talent being cultivated here, and it doesn't really hold a candle. to what they're getting over in Europe. So it's interesting like bringing over like all those players, and I know that we talked about this, but like it's you got to keep in mind too that like the NA server is 4 times smaller than Korea in terms of ranked player base. It's 4 times smaller than EU West and EU North in ranked player base, and so bringing over players is actually important to make sure that like the high elo league, like they're actually taking it seriously. You aren't running into games that are being played by streamers all the time, and making sure that those games like are taken very seriously and go well. So yeah, that's interesting. Like your approach, like utilizing more imports. I'm curious, like would you consider like Ryoma to be a successful use of an import slot? I think he's like a good example of he was taken from a minor league team, but or minor region, but he's young. He's already shown some improvement, and I'm curious, like, is that the kind of approach like you want to see other teams take?
I would say Ryoma was probably more of a failure than a success, but I don't think it was terrible. He is from OPL though, correct? So
Yeah,
or OCE or whatever.
yeah,
So
yeah.
they have
OC, OC.
special import rules coming into this year. So I believe what it is you can have two imports from any region and then one from a minor region.
Yes.
So yeah, I think in that case, and yeah, we probably should be looking to import from minor regions on top of our major region imports. And obviously, they're not going to reach the same level, but they can definitely add to the league.
Yeah, I thought that Ryoma and Closer, like for coming on over, actually they same with Broken Blade for that fact, right? Those guys like they're pretty decent players and they're still really young, so it's like dropping them in the talent pool, like it's good for them because they're getting better practice over here because it's the same thing, right? Like we have stronger region than OCE and Turkey, and so if they come over here and they get better practice, like maybe those guys improve a lot, and we saw a lot of improvement out of Ryoma. So I'm curious to see how much better he gets going into the summer because thinking of him from like week 1 to week 10 was a totally different player. He was kind of running it down week 1, like he could literally
Yeah.
only play Zoe.
It was pretty rough stuff to see him, and like Ica as well, where you kind of just have a lot of question marks about like why are they taking up these spots when you have people like Demonte who've been like proven talent and stuff like that.
I didn't bring up Ica for a reason. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. we're, we're
Oh,
gonna leave
that's
it at
funny.
that. Yeah.
So Wolverine, for you considering that Ryoma and Ica as well are kind of failures for LCS, do you think that those are the kind of people that you'd want to see in Academy, and like would they be more successful if they went straight to Academy?
I think those players would be probably good to put in academy, right? Because they're clearly higher level than current academy players. The question is if they would be willing to. Since I believe
Yeah,
they were pro players in the OPL, correct? So the question is then, does a pro player from even a minor region want to come play academy? And I think that's where you're most likely going to have to look into like already academy teams from other regions, or just go straight into solo queue if you want to get players to actually at least happily play in your academy league.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
I know moving on, kind of getting back
Yeah.
into the SGC thing. Something that we've definitely noticed is it feels like there are a few teams in SGC, like now that we're getting more games under our belt, now that we're seeing some more competition that are really setting themselves apart from the competition. And those three teams would be, or two teams for sure, would be 100 Thieves Next and Maryville. They look really, really good. I'd say Anu has I believe Anu is on that tier as well. Anu's dropped a few more games, but a lot of those games they've dropped, it feels like they're trying stuff on stage. What's your opinion? Do you feel like those are the top three teams in amateur? Do you feel like Anu belongs to be on the same tier as those teams? What are your thoughts on that one, Wolverine?
I think it's actually I think it's 100 Thieves and a new. And then I
Okay.
think Maryville is a tier below that, but I don't think anyone else is in that tier with Maryville.
Okay. Interesting. We'll have to see because I know tonight, UPL at 8 p.m. New and Maryville are coming off for a best of three. But why would you rank Maryville kind of like a little bit below Anu and 100 Thieves next out of curiosity?
I think they all have similar playstyles, but honestly, I think 100 Thieves is for sure the most consistent out of all three, so I'd probably put them at the top at this point. But I think Maryville just has too low of a ceiling, and I think their fundamentals are the worst of all three of those teams.
Okay. Okay, it's like low ceiling, like individually, or just they lack team cohesion, or
I think individually. I mean, you look at those 5 players versus the 5 on a new versus 100 Thieves.
okay, yeah, it should be a great series tonight, and we're gonna learn a lot because those. It's rare that we see those like teams of that caliber, go toe to toe. There's so many teams in amateur. I think there are 23 teams across all the
Yeah.
SGC leagues, so should be a fun one. And I'm excited to be on the cast for that one tonight too. So I'm really looking forward to that series.
Yeah, definitely can vouch. Be sure to watch that UPL series. That's in about 2 hours over on their main channel. So not gonna want to miss that one. Gonna be hearing more of Cubby's delicious voice. If I may go so far.
Delicious. Oh man, that's an adjective, man. I don't know about that.
Well, in any case, yeah, I actually have a little bit of a question here regarding those top teams. So interesting. It's just really been interesting for me to see the LCS and the LEC, um, like more recent All Pro teams where it hasn't really happened like in since they put that into effect, the All Pro like voting and stuff. C9 this last split, and then G2 the split before got their whole team on that. So it was just like the All Pro vote is just one team was the whole line across. If you were to pick one of the teams in SGC to be that, first of all, is there one? But also just on the topic of tier lists, who would you put there if you just
I
had like the
think
best individual players?
if you're picking one team, the one who comes closest is probably 100 Thieves. I
Interesting.
think
I would put a new actually if we're gonna
I
put
would as
like
well.
the one team. But yeah, I'm why do you say 100 Thieves?
I think Anu and Maryville have players that are at the top of those lists, but I think they also both have players who are really low. Like I think Rodov on Anu, like I don't think he's even close to the like, if you were making an all pro list, like probably barely pushing top 5, if that. But I think 100 Thieves has the closest to the top. I think all their players are for sure within the top 5.
I
Interesting.
I have a very different opinion of Rodolph. And before we get into like the tier list memes, just like
Yeah.
as a background, this was posted by Command Attack. We've been it's become a giant meme just because of how it was received. I think a lot of people may not realize, and we'll get into this a little bit later too, that like Command Attack, he is the mid laner for a wild card, but he also kind of doubles as a coach for that team as well. A very intelligent player. And if it was posted by anyone besides a player, I think this would have been received way better than what it actually was. But anyway, we've been talking about it for the last few days. And kind of getting back on the topic of Rodolph, I know that a lot of games that Rodolph plays, he plays hard weak side. Like for me, the most interesting matchup in amateur right now is actually 100 Thieves versus Anu. Because 100 Thieves, you know what they're going to do. They're going to give Tenacity a counter pick, and they're going to send Kenby up there, and they're going to play topside. Anu, they're going to take Callista if she's up. They're going to play Aphelios if he's up, and play around Shoryu in the bot lane. And so I think that's a really interesting matchup because not only do these teams have clear paths to victory that they like to play, but also on the other side of the map, they actually both play weak side really well. And I think that Anu doesn't function unless they have Rodolph, because Rodolph, for me, is one of the best weak side players that we have in amateur. And I know that like he doesn't have those carry performances, but I feel like he does more with so many less resources than any other top laner and actually gets so much done with that. Which is that's why I think very highly of Anu. So I'm kind of curious, like, do you agree with that? Like, do you have a similar take?
I think Rodov's laning has actually been really poor. It's definitely gotten better, and I think he's always been fine out of lane, but especially in the early season, and even now, he was just getting solo killed by everyone, right? Even in like lane matchups that were completely fine, he would just die in honestly maybe like the majority of games.
Yeah, I didn't get that impression from him. I always kind of gave him credit, like he does a really good job of absorbing pressure when they do get that bot lane rolling. So yeah, interesting. Getting into 100 Thieves next though. So you said that you think like their players are top tier like across all roles. Does that include like Auto who like just role swapped? I kind of assume not because like Otto hasn't had a ton of time yet.
Yeah, that's right. Pume just moved to Academy, so
Yeah,
I actually can't speak to Otto, honestly. I haven't seen him enough in support. He looks at least workable. Like I
yeah,
haven't seen anything bad from him from the games I've watched, but I can't actually say whether or not he's a top tier support at this point.
yeah, yeah. Um, I think it also helps too that I think Akinoki is actually kind of insane in the bot
Yeah.
lane. I don't know if you've seen that dude's Ezreal, but he makes that champion look like it looks like he's prey playing in Academy. He makes that champ look so busted. So yeah,
Yeah, I honestly think that was a pretty good upgrade for 100 Thieves. I
yeah.
think they're finding a lot more success this season.
Yeah, I didn't get to see a lot of them play with Otto and Pumi, and I know that Pumi like he's had injury issues. I think I hope that that was just an excuse for him
Yeah.
practicing with the academy roster. I hope that injuries weren't the case, but either way, I also hope that he's healthy and ready to go because it's cool seeing these players get promoted. And props to 100 Thieves because like we've been talking about the development of academies so much, and they're the only franchise that have actually invested in a tier 3 amateur team, and it's already paying off. They get a place that they can keep on cultivating young talent. Like Tenacity's young, Pumi's young, and it actually like they're doing the scouting. While this team plays, they're scouting out future academy players with this roster and putting them in the right environment. So, props to them, and I think it's good that it's paying off not only for them but for the entire scene as a whole. The fact that they're actually able to take a player up from that roster and put him on academy comfortably.
Yeah, I am actually very curious to hear your take more, Wolverine. So you said that the bot lane position for 100 next is an upgrade. Would you say that the bot lane pair is an upgrade as well?
I honestly don't know. I think we need to see more, but I think just purely in the ADC position, I mean, I think that's for sure an upgrade. I think that's why they made that move. I think that's why Otto moved to support. Especially because I've heard that Otto is a main shot caller on the team.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not surprising. He has the most experience, hands down.
Right.
Yeah.
I loved his duo streams with Aframu back in the day when he was playing the Wizard brand AD carry.
Oh God,
That was always fun.
that's way back. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. I was curious about that one. So let's dive just right into the tier list that started it all here, the command attack tier list. So just looking at this, of course, it did get a lot of reception, like we were already talking about. My first question for you guys is, what if you were to like pick out like one thing that you think is like really egregious, if you have one, just like really a hot take in your eyes. What's the first thing that catches your eye here?
Yeah, Wolverine.
I don't actually have a big one. I
Okay.
would say I think some of the like lower tiers, like I think on the initial release, I thought Josie was low, but I think he got moved up to A tier, and I think at this point, I still think A5 is low. Um, I coach both those players, so I'm honestly pretty biased, but I think they're both pretty underrated. I think they're just not well known. I think they're both probably like lowish A tier. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think my biggest meme is the fact that Command Attack, he posted it and he put himself in Dragoon S tier and then put Shorter Ace B tier. And put him and Dragoon as like on his top 5 and Shorter Ace wasn't. And look, like being honest, like to Command Attack, I respect the fact like you have some faith in your teammates and you put yourself on a top 5 list, right? Like confidence is a part of being a top player. I would not put you there if I was making my own top 5 list, but I respect it. Um, I was like, why is Shorter Ace B tier, man? Like, come on, like that's your man. Like you gotta bump him up. He's on A tier now, so I don't know if Shorter Ace like made some sick plays, people moved him up, but we'll keep on updating the tier list as we see more gameplay.
I thought that was pretty interesting actually, because a lot of the criticism to that tier list was like teammate bias with Command Attack, and Dragoon, and even Joey being like really high comparatively to what a lot of people thought. But his current jungler was placed in B tier, which I think was almost unanimously considered very low.
Yeah,
So I thought that criticism was kind of strange, actually.
Yeah, it
yeah,
is. It is really weird because if everyone else is saying like, "Wow, that's pretty low," and it's his own jungler, I don't know, man. What does that say? What does that make you think if you're short a race here.
Yeah,
But
I don't know. I think it was like kind of a giant meme, but
yeah,
it's just tough, and like I think this like opens up, the floor for kind of a bigger discussion about criticism in amateur play. Um, because it is something that's like it's kind of missing, right? And I think there are like a lot of reasons for criticism missing. Like one of them being the fact that SGC, like this is ultimately takes place over 3 months, and the players that are playing at this SGC probably only like 30% of them played in the last one. So there's a huge amount of turnover. It's really tough to criticize players because like it's not like they're like a bunch of talk shows going on or anything like that. It's just kind of like coaches bantering on Twitter. But I actually think this like opens up the floor for like what do you like Wolverine is, especially as someone who's not afraid to say what's on your mind, especially on Twitter. Like, what do you think like is the appropriate approach to like criticizing amateur play in a way that it's like creates a good conversation and like uh in a way that's like like respectful but also like appropriate because like it is our job to be critical.
I honestly think that is the biggest takeaway from this tier list is the response, right? I think the response was majority kind of negative. Like a lot of players were pretty upset by it, and I think that's really consistent across all of amateur. I think that's why you see very few player tier lists as opposed to even regions like EU, is because any criticism is actually very discouraged in NA. I think any criticism at all is seen as flame. Like anytime you disagree with anyone, like it's drama, it's a whole thing. Whereas like in other regions or even just among like really high level players or analysts, like disagreements are just seen as disagreements, and criticism is seen as a way to improve. So it's really strange that in a league that's even below a developmental league, that criticism, which should be like what everyone is seeking out, is more shunned than even maybe like academy or LCS. I think like amateur is very strange as far as the way that it goes about receiving criticism.
Yeah, I think it's also like just the fact that like criticism, like it's obviously like going to happen within teams, right? Like players are going to criticize each other. You're going to try and improve as a team. That part of that is fixing what's wrong. But we don't see a lot of that from like coming from like other people in the community, right? Like other casters or like shows like this. Like it doesn't exist yet in the amateur scene. And I know like that's something like we're trying to do and like go about in a way that's appropriate. I also like I tend to be careful though too because like for a lot of players, it's not like none of us are doing this because like we're making bank or anything, right? It's like we're playing off of a dream, and there's a huge amount of turnover. So it's not like we have years of experience to go off of. Like, I can refer back to someday and like what a beast he was in season 5. Like in other regions or like international tournaments, right? Like we don't have this massive sample size that stays consistent. Like a lot of like my stuff can come from like collegiate. I come from a collegiate background. So like I can confidently talk about Evan RL and Papa Chow. Like those guys have been running train in the collegiate scene forever. And so like it's easy to like say like, hey, like, they're playing as well this game for like what I'm used to seeing from them. But for a lot of other bot lanes, like that B tier of the list, like not enough information was on there. And that's true for a lot of players, right? This might be their first time playing an SGC. Or they might be young or they might be returning, from after a while. So it is tough to like find the right way to do it because we don't know the baseline for a lot of these players, right? Like we don't have um it's like not consistent or like we don't have enough information or players are inconsistent. So I think it's like an interesting bigger conversation.
so with that being said, I actually think it's rather interesting because you say that how the people watching don't really have a lot of that information. To me, that kind of seems like it justifies Command Attack making that one even more because he's one of the people who is in solo queue playing against all the other players on the list and everything. So even though it was a very like a majority negative reaction to it, it kind of seems emblematic of just what type of person in the scene could have made a list like this. And like as a spectator, it's kind of a different it's a different perception than just playing against all the players all the time. So that actually, I don't know, that's just kind of something that it made me think of where maybe Command Attack is just big brain after all, setting this one up for everyone.
Yeah, I think that was his purpose, right? Like he
Yeah.
somewhat explained that in the explanation to his tier list was that he wanted
Yeah.
to create more information, right? And
Yeah.
it wasn't simply like he wanted to put out a single tier list and have it be like the final word, right? He wanted other coaches, other players, other analysts to then make their tier list. And so I think his overarching goal was to create just more information in the space so that when managers or org owners or coaches are coming into the scene and looking to pick up players, they have something to look to, right? Like there's more community discussion on which players are good and which aren't. And we can have like a more streamlined process. We can have like the better players receive more recognition and be on better teams. And I think if done correctly, obviously the overall goal would be to improve the scene.
Yeah. I that's like kind of like what I was getting into, right? Like the fact that he's the one that releases it. Like if let's say like I released it like as a color caster, you know, I think it's automatically received like 10 times better. Just the fact that like at least like then, you know, like I might be wrong. I don't know things behind the scene, but at least it takes out the player bias, you know. Like I said, like I don't care that Command Attack put himself you know, on his own team. Like you have to like believe in yourself to be the best. I totally respect that. But it did kind of like become a meme just because it came from him. And like I respect his work. I know that he founded the program at U of I. I founded the program at Miami Ohio University. I've actually I had a call with him like way back when talking about esports programs. But yeah, it just the fact that it came from him just kind of that's like why it got like so memey and like didn't give it the best look. But hey, it also did open up a discussion, and it's good that you know like we can talk about some of these things.
Yeah.
And I know, speaking of Command Attack and Wolverine, I know that you actually wanted to dive into Wildcard Gaming quite a bit and their team, as I think that you have a very different take on their team as a lot of others.
I right now think that Wildcard Gaming are the current favorites to win the Scouting Ground circuit if they do make it in.
Okay. I don't think a lot of people would agree with you, including myself, but uh, Wolverine, why do you think that?
I think they're the only team that's actually improving, right? Like I think you look at the top three teams. I think the top three teams are like pretty much unanimously, or at least the top two, is like 100 Thieves and New and Maryville. Like all those teams have very similar styles where their drafts are really awful. Their play is like really awful, but they're just gonna run you over because they're better players and they play better as a team. Like they have more structure, they have more resources. But Wildcard is like the only team that I've seen in amateur that actually plays the game. Like they're actually drafting to draft, and not just picking champions that their players like to play. Uh,
Okay.
so yeah, I think even versus a new and 100 Thieves, like obviously they lost both those matches, but I think they looked really good. Like they looked like they were playing better League of Legends than both those teams.
So like when you get in the draft, is it like do you think their drafts are better because like they're picking Ornn more often, or because like they actually like come in with like some sort of game plan?
Picking Ornn more often is a significant advantage. Shows a lot about your team for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But I think they're picking more for actual composition and for their
Okay.
teams, right? Whereas I think like most teams, especially when you're looking at top teams who have very strong individual players, they'll just pick champions that their players like to play. They'll pick for comfort, as you know, people like to say. But really, it's just picking for agency, right? They want to pick strong champions, so they don't actually have to like play in any way that's smart, right? They can just run you down with champions that are strong because they have better players than you and because they have better teamwork than you.
Yeah.
But obviously, that's bad if the enemy
Yeah.
team can actually play correctly. And I think wildcard is improving at a much higher rate than those teams. And I think if they can continue to draft in the way that they've been drafting in the last few weeks, like eventually they'll be able to beat these teams. I think pretty easily.
Yeah. So my question with this is, even though they are improving at a very impressive rate, and they are like making leaps and bounds in all those areas as you're mentioning, the timetable is pretty slim for when it's all going to go down and when the qualification ends. There's about maybe less than 2 months, or maybe 2 months around there. So to me, especially in a case where there's already a set like top three teams, and then underneath that as well you have set teams that everyone kind of agrees on just being there. To me, this says more the wild card is a dark horse to like pull off some upsets, maybe not win the whole thing, but place higher than people are expecting. So I'm curious how you got from where I am at to they're gonna win the whole thing. I wanna hear your take on how they're going to beat the top teams.
I think the biggest concern for wildcard is actually qualifying points because they didn't make it into LWL,
Yeah.
which I think is like by far the most points you can get.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a very heavily weighted league.
so I think that is rough for them, and I think with playoffs coming up, I don't think they're actually currently in form to beat those teams. So obviously, I think the biggest struggle for them is making scouting ground circuit. I think
Yeah.
if they do make scouting ground circuit, I think they're by far the favorites because I think only in like I think in 4 weeks, if they're even like I think you could go 3 weeks, if they're improving at the current rate they are, I think they're much better than a new and 100 Thieves if they
Interesting.
continue being able to draft in the same way.
Okay, so definitely. So you think that they might be favorites if they get in right now, like definite dark horse status. Like if they get in, they're gonna make noise. It's kind of like where you have them, like run the table potentially.
Yeah, I think their biggest problem right now is honestly jungle role. I think
Okay,
like they need they need champ pool changes in jungle role. They need
not a fan of Scuttle.
um, and they need to be able to like play better with their jungler. Their jungler doesn't seem to be on the same page as their team.
Okay.
So I think honestly that's really their only issue at this point, other than qualifier points.
Right. Well, I just want to say I know that Tenacity in the chat, just at Fallen Bandit, the coach, your drafts are trash, dickhead. So, Fallen Bandit, you might have to work on those drafts. Just coming on out as Tenacity. Be careful, man. I know that you got amateur McDonald's in your bio. That if you keep on playing with coaches like that, you might end up at McDonald's. So, we'll see what happens. Anyway, Wolverine, it's been fun having you on, get in the chat a little bit. Do you have any other big blanket closing statements from our resident, S plus tier ASOL player coming on in?
I would like to shout out Evan RL's Twitter real quick. Follow Evan RL. Honestly, makes the best tier lists of anyone in the amateur scene for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, Wolverine, it was really a pleasure having you on. Appreciate all the research you do in the amateur scene and kind of your different take on things. Always kind of fun bouncing ideas off of other people that follow the scene. Kind of helps us all improve. So yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
All right. Smax.
Yes, that's me.
Are you ready for this?
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay. Well, on this podcast, we want to keep it all things SGC. But unfortunately, something so blatant and stupid happened in the amateur scene that we just have to cover it, whether we like it or not. And it's also very appropriate that we're covering it because guess what, Smax? You're the one who I mentioned at the start of the show, opened up Pandora's box. And so we are obviously, if anyone has had their head in a ditch for the last week, I believe it started last Wednesday, but we are going to cover the PRL drama, both of us being casters in the scene, knowing some things behind the scene, and also all that coming to light thanks to our good friend Smax, who decided to put out a tweet and start a wildfire. Whether he meant to or not, I don't think he meant to, but guess what? It happened. So here we are talking about it. So
I
Smax, what do you
I
have to say?
I definitely didn't envision something like this happening where everyone immediately had the backs of all the casters, specifically Lemons. That was awesome. I'm astounded. I'm blown away by the support from everyone in the scene for not only my own like tweet that was the spark, but Lemons in specific. I
Yeah.
am so happy because I've known that guy for a long time, about as long as I've been a caster, and I love lemons. I love lemons to death, and I'm so happy that everyone else feels the same sentiment because, well, to put it
We'll get to
bluntly,
lemons, but like,
yeah,
why did you like? What kind of led you to making this public, right? Because like, obviously, this wasn't the first straw, right? It was more like the final straw. It's like, what were like some of the things that led you to like having to make this tweet?
yeah. So I was on the staff for Phoenix Rising League for 6 months, and that was really my first bout into casting as a paid gig. It didn't pay very much, but it was a paid gig, and I got to meet a lot of people. It was a diamond scene. They had a challenger scene as well for a brief period of time, and all through that time, I just sat by and kind of watched Canadian champ, the owner of PRL, be just a terrible person to so many different people in the scene. And it was kind of indoctrinated into me as well, because it was my first time casting and stuff. I was kind of just sheltered from the rest of the amateur scene and the rest of the amateur leagues. So I didn't really get to meet anyone who didn't stop by PRL's door and go through there. Um,
Was there
so
any like exclusivity agreement that was thrown around?
yes, there was.
Yeah,
He really wanted me to sign an exclusivity agreement so that I would only cast and make content for PRL, which, if you are not a caster, that is career suicide. You will not make any money if you only cast for one place. Uh,
yeah,
Especially PRL, who pays the casters 60 cents a game.
it's math.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, I was essentially like, people would come and go, and I would get told, oh yeah, they wanted to cast for other leagues. They're so two-faced. They're going for other places. They're betraying the trust of PRL and Canadian Champ, and that's kind of just the sentiment that is still overflowing, as you can see all of the tweets and everything, from the staff that are currently there, from people
yeah.
who used to be staff, from people who used to cast for them. It's very one-sided against Pirlo, and it's shocking to me because, like I said, I didn't really know that this was such a shared sentiment. And if I knew that, then I would have said something a long time ago.
Yeah. Okay. So just to make sure that like we're being responsible about this, we're gonna set up a timeline for everything that happened in case, like I said, you had a head in the ditch or you don't have Twitter for whatever reason in the esports scene. But it all starts with Smax's tweet. And Smax, you have 131 followers, which by the way, his Twitter is up there on the screen somewhere. Not this way, probably the other way. Anyway, go fix that. But with 131 followers, you managed to get 25 retweets and 100 favorites and 28 comments that were all pretty much mostly positive. And that started everything that went down. And from there, we get so many other casters that hop on, people that are talking about bad experiences with PRL. Um, we start to have some banger memes getting made, which, we're all here for. And then Canadian Champ responds. And this is where, for me, this is where the problem really starts.
Yeah.
Criticism is fair, right? We all mess up on amateur orgs. But then Canadian Champ throws up this tweet, which I know is going to go off the screen. And Smax, I will give you the honor of reading it since it does try and get to your boy Lemons.
Oh, so this is just brutal. You cannot get away with something like this and still retain respect as a person in the scene. So he unveils some private financial secrets and information with its lemons, and I he it's deleted now, so he knows that this was a mistake. He's apologized about it a bunch of times, but you can't just be on. Well, first of all, he's on his regular org Twitter.
Yeah.
It's called Phoenix Rising League, and he's calling out personal issues that he himself has had with one guy who doesn't even work for him anymore.
Yeah. And
I
this is
oh
terrible. Like, let's just play a little bit scenario here, right? This is the equivalent of Adam Silver going on the NBA Twitter and calling out LeBron for something that he did in a contract. Or imagine if the executive for CBS went on the main CBS Twitter and said that he had beef with Jim Nance. Like, this is utter garbage, right? And the fact that it is so just vastly incompetent in this league, not to mention the fact that you're bringing up extremely personal situations, which, by the way, before we actually talked about all this, I checked with Lemons to make sure it's okay. And first off, a lot of this isn't true, but second off, just send him a friendly DM. Like, figure it out behind closed doors. Instead, you create this absolute PR disaster that it's so vastly incompetent. And the fact that we're talking about this it's legitimately frustrating, right? Because like there are people that actually care about the scene, right? That's why we're doing Cup. That's why we're doing all these other leagues. And the fact that someone comes in and makes it look bad for everyone else, it's embarrassing for all of us.
Yeah, I don't condone the sending of hate messages to Canadian champ. That's been done. He's
No.
said that people are doing that. I have not done that. I don't want people to do that. So don't. But
Yeah,
the
and we'll
fact
get
that
to that, but
yeah, the fact that he's out here as a person who he's got a following with his League of Legends community. He was someone who was trying to get an SGC. He had a challenger league, a challenger division just this year. He's got a lot of eyes on him, and to go out in such a public way, just completely singling someone out and bashing them in this way, I at this point, like, you there that's too far. You
and
can't really go back on that anymore. And uh, I it's
and
so sad because he has so many. It's a very marketable league, right? Phoenix Rising League gets a lot of viewers. They've got a lot of community. It's genuinely very entertaining to watch. I was a part of it for half a year. I'm really sad that is now tarnished because this guy went and did this in a very public manner. It's really
but
disappointing.
in the words of the late great Billy Mays, but wait, there's more.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, more casters hop on. I know that casters that didn't even have anything to do with the league just started hopping on because you cannot do someone in our fraternity like that, like Lemons. Like the fact that that got like aired out at dirty laundry in the public is ridiculous, right? So we have guys like Opal hopping on from OPL, no business with this, but just calling BS, right? Anyway, that proceeds for PRL to release their first apology from Canadian champ, which was probably the worst apology I've ever seen in my life. It made TSM's apology look good. The fact that he had to go on the main account and say, Lemons, if you're reading this, I, in parentheses, Canadian champ, just so we make sure that it's him, and sincerely sorry and hope you can eventually forgive me. Like, dude, come on. Like, at least try or at least reach out to him in DMs. And once again, I talked to Lemons before this, and Lemons, it was such a bad apology that other staff members from PRL personally reached out to Lemons to apologize, right? Like, it's not only embarrassing for the entire scene, it was embarrassing for the staff too, okay? And it's so garbage. Like, it's so utter trash, the fact like we were actually talking about this. But once again, it gets worse, right? And then we have I don't think anyone knows who put together this Google Doc, but it's probably the greatest Google Doc I've ever seen. Canadian Champ's Candace account, which goes through and lists the punctuation, the phrases that he uses, which pretty much links him to this private account or this fake account that we all knew was his, a burner account, just pretty much gassing and juicing himself up. Nice photo from Unsplash, like at least try and hide it, but you were also hiding behind a burner account. Like this is stuff that if I'm a parent, I'd expect this coming out of my middle schooler. And the fact that this is coming out from the owner of a league is once again garbage. That's the phrase that keeps on going here. It is pure garbage. So
Yeah.
we
By the way, with
yeah.
the Candace account, he continued to dig into Lemons on this account as well.
Yes.
So there was even more stuff going on, where he went even further than what he was going on the public account, which I believe those tweets are now deleted as well. But he was taking digs at Lemons on that account, myself as well, and Milky Cereal too. Like
Yeah. I
he
think the
called Milky
funniest part.
Cereal a bad caster.
Oh God, no. The funniest part of all this too is that there was like one org that backed him up, and it felt like a Trump tweet when he's like retweeting like Fox News, like, "Oh yes, thank you so much for being on my side," which like he put on the PRL feed.
And then the Candace tweets like, "Thanks for the apology. You're good people."
Yeah, like this guy's just gassing himself up, like good old KD burner account coming on out. So if this didn't get ridiculous enough, since the owner is purely incompetent and has no idea what to do with running a league, we have the staff members of PRL step in for this, and I do feel bad for certain members of the PRL staff who actually you know, have to put out this wildfire that, to me and to what looks like the rest of the community, was all caused by the decision maker for this league. So we have apology number 2 where, discords are listed. It's the actual staff. It's a legitimate apology. And you know what? Like, props to those people for actually stepping up and, throwing themselves in front of the bus and kind of biting the bullet just due to the pure incompetence from the owner. Seriously. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I know those guys from when I was on the staff as well. They definitely do mean well. They had a lot of like back and forth between him as well when the whole situation was going down the lead up to this as well. So yeah, I do want to give some respect to the staff that are currently still on there. Um, because I definitely know how that feels. You wanna continue being in the scene because like I said, it's genuinely a very fun community to be a part of in the stream and everything. So I fully agree. If you are listening and you're a member on the staff, then props to you for trying to clean up the mess.
Actually take it a step further and say, if you're listening and you're a member of the staff, reach out to me, because guess what? There are leagues like Excellency Esports, run by Jake Kelton, or Risen Esports, who's also an SGC league run by Joe, who actually care about you and actually want to see the scene grow. And I know these people personally. Seriously, reach out to me, have a 10-minute call with me, and I will vouch for you. Like, please get out of there, because, like, if you want to save it and stick around, that's fine. I respect you sticking around with this, with a ship that's sinking. But there are good people that actually care about the gold to plat, the plat to diamond elos that hold really good tournaments. Like, I thoroughly enjoy casting at Excellency. I thoroughly enjoy casting over at Risen with Joe. Like, go put your talents over there. You do not need to waste it with an owner that clearly doesn't care about the scene and doesn't want to see you succeed if he's paying you $15 for, or $10 for 15 games. Like that. That's absolute trash. So, still moving on. Now we have the petition. So, a petition was started by White Lotus GG, and it was to get Riot's attention about what is going on at PRL, which is a great idea, until a bunch of people in the community found out that their signatures were actually being forged.
Yeah, it takes away a lot from the validity of the entire petition when forgeries are going down. So, yeah, it definitely got a little bit dicey. That whole petition, they're still trying to do it. So if you do still want to sign the petition, then by all means, you can reach out to us. I'll give you the link for that. But um, we were all very confused in the Discord server when we
Yeah.
were making the petition at as to like who would do something like this. And then we get a public message from someone who's on the staff still saying that he is responsible for forging the signatures. And it's from within
Apparently,
PRL
yeah.
staff.
Apparently trying to oust another staff member, which is, I don't know. Like, please come up with a better story. Like, there's no reason for you to forge. Like, that's illegal. Like, you're fully admitting to illegal activity. Like, why? It's just like, you could not write this. Like, it's so unfathomable. Like, how terrible that this all went down. Like I
Yeah,
said, we don't want to talk about this, but we
no.
have to, because it's like an absolute dumpster fire that we have to cover.
I'm laughing. It's not funny. It's
No,
just it's
it's
just
funny how
ridiculous.
terrible. It's funny how incompetent this is.
It's
Like, this is what we
shocking
call
that
in
it's got
business.
to
It's
this point.
gross. Yeah, it's gross negligence. Like, this is beyond gross negligence. And
Yeah.
guess what? There's still more. So, a Canadian champ says that he's going to take a 2-week break from social media, which is fine. But now, and this is really where this makes my freaking blood boil, man. Now he goes on, and he is saying that his behavior is caused because so many people have sent him threats, and he has received 20 years of hate for stuff that he's done in the last few days. Okay? Now, first off, Smax, you hit on this. I went ahead on this too. There's no excuse for telling someone else to kill themselves over the internet, right? And I am sincerely sorry for anyone that's received those messages, but unfortunately, a lot of us have. I have. I played a solo. I'm a GM player in solo queue, or I was early in the season. I had someone I was landing with come into my stream and tell me to off myself. You don't see me raising that as an excuse flag for any single mistake I make. And guess what? The people that were telling Canadian Champ to kill himself weren't even the people he was going after. This is completely irrelevant. It's a red herring. And this guy thinks that it's actually about him. Like, all this is actually about him, and it's not, man. You went after Lemons in a way that was so incredibly unprofessional that you never deserve to have a job in esports again, okay? This is not about you. Please shut up and do not say anything else, because you are only digging your own grave. And the fact that he is still going on, he's threatening legal action for people that actually posted about the situation on Twitter. Like, once again, I talked to Hypertension before this, right? Hypertension did nothing illegal. We shared the screenshots that he took about like what PRL said. There's nothing illegal, and this guy's threatening libel or slander against him. Guess what, man? I don't know anything about the law, but none of that's going to hold up in court, and no lawyer's actually going to take on that case. And guess what? I also checked with these guys and these casters to make sure that it's okay to talk about this private stuff, and they're cool with it. Maybe you should take some advice from me and do that behind the scenes before you just start airing your dirty laundry and playing the victim card or playing the me card, because none of this is about you. It's about the fact that you are so grossly incompetent and have no idea about what's going on. And I apologize for ranting, but it's so terrible that this is like actually happening to the scene that we care a lot about. Like, that's why we're doing this, right? That's why we run these leagues, why we have SGC. And it's brutal that someone comes in and tries to blow, like, just drop a bomb on it.
I'm like a lot of people. I'm in the scene because I like talking about my favorite video game, and that's League of Legends. And I fully agree. I can't wrap my head around the actions that he's done in the last few days. Like, honestly, to be completely honest, if you're listening right now, Canadian Champ, if you didn't say what you did to Lemons, it probably would have blown over. It probably would have, like, people probably would have forgot in like maybe a week tops. That it would have been all in the past. But you just had to go and make it so personal and attack one of our own
in a way that's not even true.
I don't. It's just childish, and for me, seeing that you're struggling with all the criticism coming your way, and you're like, oh man, you're taking it too far. You took it too far. This is because you took it too far.
If anyone should sue for libel or slander, it should be Lemons against Canadian
It should.
Champ. Yeah. Like, that's like actually like how it's so unfathomable how this guy just painted his own little world. It's actually ridiculous. Like, the fact that like we're having this conversation. Yeah.
But honestly, at the end of the day, it's probably something that you guys listening probably haven't even heard of before. If you like didn't know about PRL in the past before this past week, I wouldn't blame you. It's just something that's been really close to my heart because, like I said, it's the reason that I got into casting the way that I did, or at least my avenue, right? The reason that I'm doing is because I like League of Legends and I like talking about it. But it's really something that's personal to me, and I'm really, it's just really disappointing for me to see that it's blown up this way, and it's just all because of Canadian Champ himself, and he's really got no one else to blame, and that's really what it is at the end of the day. I hope that PRL can continue without him at this point, because he's dug his grave so deep, but the staff are trying to dig themselves out of it, and the league as well. And like I mentioned, the league itself is doing really well. They've got a really good community, and I had a lot of fun when I was in it as well. And if it can continue, that's awesome. But I don't want to see Canadian Champ in the scene.
Yeah, and like I feel bad for you, right? Like, if I started casting over at Excellency, when I got back into things, over the winter, and if anything happened to that org, like, I'd be devastated, and nothing will, because Jake and that team, they're awesome people. But if you want to get out of PRL, Exhibit A, right? Like, Smax has game. He's over here like doing other stuff. He did not sign an exclusivity agreement, and if you guys want to jump ship, that's fine. If you guys want to go down with the ship, that's okay too. Like, I somewhat respect that, and my heart does go out to the staff members that are trying to fix this. Because a lot of what's happened, it feels like it's really the actions of one person, and unfortunately, that's the decision maker. But you do not have to sign exclusivity agreements and take $10 for 15 casts to actually make it in esports, right? You can do other stuff. Exhibit A here. And if you guys reach out to me, I will have a conversation with you and vet you and recommend you to Joe, Jake, and everyone else in the scene if you really want to, because no one deserves to go through that garbage. And the fact that this actually happened is it's disgusting. So to everyone that was affected by PRL, to everyone that got called out, I hope that this somewhat was like we tried to lay out the timeline, tried to cover all the points. We didn't even get to apology number 3, which is like a freaking poem on Twitlonger. Like I don't even know what that was. Like it just please shut up. It cannot get better. But like it's devastating to the scene that this happens. It makes us all look bad, just the fact that we're associated with this. But it's a real bummer. And Smax, I'm happy that you're here. I'm happy that you got out. I hope that other casters and staff members get out. And I hope that some serious action is taken against Canadian Champ, because it's so grossly incompetent and negligence and just without any care for what happens to the teams and everything in that league. Like, we didn't even hit on the money issues, right? Like, that's an issue in itself. We don't have proof of that. All we know is that you went after a caster in a way that was so incredibly unprofessional. Like, please just imagine if a CBS sports executive went on the CBS account and did that to Jim Nance. That is literally what happened here. Imagine what would actually happen if that like took place. Like, just the storm that would take place afterwards. It's unreal.
It honestly is, and
Yeah.
I apologize for us getting heated over this, but it's
I
just
don't.
really something that we
I don't.
it's yeah, I mean, yeah, but it's just really something that is very personal to
Yeah.
the two of us and a lot of other people as well. So I'm really hoping that we can get past this and move on with the rest of amateur scene, because everyone else is doing such a great job as well. So just shout out to every other org.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of every other org, before we go today, I do want to give a little bit of a highlight as to what's going on in SGC for this week. Of course, Cup is starting up. That is tomorrow. So those 2 matches that we're going to be seeing are Team Fish Taco and Anu. And then that's a best of 2. And then we've got also another best of 2 on the mainstream, Radiance and 100 Thieves. So those are going to be some banger matches on our own stream right here tomorrow. So you're not going to want to miss those. We've also got UPL tonight, which Cubby's going to be casting there as well. And yeah.
Great series. We got Maryville versus New Esports. Myself, the dirty one-trick colorcaster, is going to be accompanied by Chilling Walk, who is a little bit more flexible, going to go Phil over to play-by-play, where he's just as talented. We're really excited for that series. And hey, on a bright note, SGC, it's in full swing. It's going to be a great week of games. We get 16 games tomorrow. And I know that, people are filling out info sheets. We've got EO sheets. The community is really banding together to talk about these teams. We're excited to really get into the meat of things as the season goes on. Not to mention the fact that Big League, they're already in playoffs. So we've got another series on Friday too. It's going to be a really exciting week of SGC play. Hope you guys don't miss any of it. And thanks so much for tuning in, because the fact that, we got to interview Wolverine, I think we all learned a lot more about Wolverine. I appreciate his hot takes, as well as, just kind of picking his brain, because he does study amateur scene a lot. And the fact that we got to talk about PRL was something that, we both kind of fought for. And we're really glad that we got the chance to do it, because it matters a lot to us. And, at Cup, we want to keep on building the amateur scene up. And it sucks when another org tears it down. So I'm really glad we got to talk about that, even though it was unfortunate circumstances. And Smax, thank you for opening up Pandora's box and making this all possible for us.
No problem. Don't mention it. But yeah, with all the SGC stuff going into full swing of things, we are not going to be lacking talking points for the rest of our episodes here. So you've not heard the last of Cubby and Smax here. So yeah, be sure to tune in for another episode of Challengers Chat Room next week, same time, 5:30 Eastern time. We'll see you all tomorrow on this stream for the Analyst Desk, and we'll see you all then next week as well. Have a good one.